hello benefit sponges and other people, because basically everybody agreed that it'd be okay for these to be seen by everyone after a few days. So what I'll probably do is maybe put this up next Monday. But the advantage of that is it means that I can also put it up as a podcast. I need to sort that out. Yeah, so first things first, update. Really busy, weirdly. I've got so much stuff I need to sort out. I need to sort out stuff like making this into a podcast that I can put up line, because a lot of people like the idea of it, but they can't make the time to sit and watch a video, which I completely understand. And also just trying to sort everything else out. One thing I have sorted out is you'll be able to see I've got a light. So now for these videos, when you see me in my bedroom, not like that, filth, you hopefully won't get the flicker from the screen because I've got another light, which should cancel out. And if it doesn't, then holy mother of pearl, something's gone wrong. Also, I've got this, but I might have to send it back because it's not really working. I bought a kind of quite expensive, to be fair, green screen solution, just because initially I kind of thought I could just paint a wall green, but I'm moving out of here soon. I'm moving with my girlfriend, and she's got a really nice flat, and she would not be up for me painting a wall green by any means. So I kind of figured maybe just invest in something that's good, simple, doesn't involve a big lighting setup, because obviously no matter where I am, I'm not going to have much room because I live in England. So I'm trying to make something that's not insane, that will work quite easily. This still is a bit insane, but I kind of accidentally, I think I've bought a second-hand one and it's a bit scuffed. I'm going to play around with it this afternoon and see if I can get it working properly. Because if I can, then it means that I've saved myself some cash buying a cheaper one. So yeah, we'll see. So really what I'm doing this week is sort of getting myself on my feet. Obviously yesterday I put up a Dark Souls video about a coconut. If you haven't seen that, do watch it, even if you don't like Dark Souls, because to be fair, it's not really anything to do with Dark Souls. And other stuff I'm working on, really, I've got some stuff I want to do. I'm playing with the idea of doing a kind of Oculus Rift spoof thing, which would basically be the joke of, like, you know, kind of Blue Peter style, do it yourself Oculus Rift experiences, which would basically be kind of putting a black box on your head and pretending to do things. I'm working on that at the moment, just because I like the idea. It's trying to work out the physical representations. So I've got the core of the joke there, but really the joke follows on with then being like, what would you be doing in the real world that would simulate as if you were playing a game? I don't know, like surgery simulator might be just, I don't know, loads of bananas in a bowl. I don't know, I need to work on it. But I've got the core of the idea, and now it's just a case of fleshing out the rest of the jokes. I like it. I think it's a good idea. I've just got to finish it off. But that'll come in time. Other than that, the other stuff I've been thinking about, as an overall update, I think the most exciting thing about this is just the fact that I don't have to do anything. Which sounds... Obviously, I do have to do stuff. But I mean, like, a lot of the time, the kind of content that gets made for traditional games websites is very much driven by you know, the current conversation, what's happening, what's going on now, what game's coming out soon, what games just come out, what series has hit a landmark. So a lot of the time these conversations are dictated by kind of external forces to an extent. That makes it sound a lot darker than it actually is. But what I mean is that now I can talk about a game whenever I want. You know, that there's no reason not to. As long as you guys find it interesting, I can just have a conversation about anything at any stage. And so some of the stuff I was saying on Twitter the other day, I can make a big video about Planescape Torment, and I'm going to do that. Don't know when I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it in the next few weeks. But I'd like to spend some time doing that. I'd like to go back and play some more of it and work out what the video would be, but really just do a kind of video about why that game is great, because I know a lot of people don't have time to play that, and I've talked about it a bit in the past, but I'd really like to delve in and do a proper video about it. Just something, a bit of love. And on the same note, actually, Viva Pinata. I realise now that there's never going to be a good time to talk about Viva Pinata. It's a game that is just... It's gone. I mean, Microsoft, yeah, I'll talk about this in the video, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I'd love to do a big piece about Viva Pinata and why it was really interesting and why it was really good. But that, you know, within the traditional media structure, there may never come a time that's a good time to talk about Viva Pinata ever again. So stuff like that is quite exciting to me, because it's sort of changing the way I'm looking at everything, and it's taking a little while for my head to get into that gear of just being able to pick out specific things that I'd like to talk about that don't have to necessarily be relevant. But also I want to keep abreast of things. And one of the reasons I'm investing quite a chunk of my savings into a proper green screen thing is because I like to appear on camera and talk about things and to illustrate things. And also I want something that I can just jump in and use, because obviously it's one of the things that I like doing is being able to react very quickly to things, and just to be able to go, okay, this has happened, here's a reaction to it. And part of that is having a kind of studio setup that allows me to kind of click of a fingers, just jump in and do stuff. So that's really cool. It's just taking me a while to get everything sorted out, really. Also, I mean, on that note, like, I'm trying to set up my audio thing a bit better. I'm in the process of buying a kind of boom for my mic and a thing, just so it's kind of like a bit of flow at the moment. I'm getting into it. I've also been really, really busy with this other stuff. I've had a bit of life laundry I need to do on Monday, Tuesday. And because I have signed this contract to do this sort of comedy-based thing with The Escapist, I need to kind of get that done a bit. Well, not all of it, but I need to get ahead of it. So it's the next few weeks are going to be really tricky, because obviously I expected this Patreon to be a kind of much smoother curve. Maybe people would, pledge as they saw content. I wasn't expecting so many people to just pledge money before they've really seen me do any of my new stuff, which is amazing. Obviously, we've already hit 200% of the target. I'm kind of at the stage now where it's looking like I don't really need to do much outside of this, which is going to be brilliant. But unfortunately, I have signed a contract for another company to do a one-off project, and that project will tail off. You'll understand more. I can't tell you why, because it sort of would spoil the surprise. I'm not under contract not to, but I think it'd be worth waiting to see what it is. But you'll see when it kicks off. You'll appreciate why it will take up much less of my time after the initial few things. I don't want to say any more because I'll give it away, but yeah, it's gonna be kind of quite an intense one for the next month. I'm gonna be working a lot trying to keep up with that stuff, and also doing stuff for you guys on here. But after that, it should kind of level out a bit, and things should get a bit more smooth. And that's why at the moment I'm investing a lot of time into getting ahead of the game with the Escapist stuff, just so I can get that out of the way and really focus on this. Getting a proper studio set up in here so I can just quickly and easily do things without... And I mean, as you can see, it's kind of at the moment I'm in a bit of a middle ground where I'm trying to balance this whole, like, using my bedroom as a studio and a place to live. And part of that process will come together. And I think... it's the same thing with, I was hoping in my head to be able to get the regular podcast going much more quickly, but actually I'm kind of trying to get my shit sorted out, and I know that when the podcast starts, I want it to be weekly. I want it to have this flow and this structure and have something in place that will be solid. So at the moment it's kind of baby steps, and I want to make sure that when that happens, it happens properly. But for now, I've got loads of admin. Even when you're not running a proper business, you end up with like tons of admin. It is bullshit. Other stuff I'm thinking about at the moment is I want to make a video about Dark Souls 2 in terms of my concerns about the reviews. And that's not really being like cynical. It's just I've had a lot of thoughts about that stuff going around in my head in terms of how important the reviews are in the context of who are the people reviewing it, what are they going into it with the mindset of, and also just thinking about the fact that obviously when Dark Souls came out, it was such a different game to what it is now, and thinking back also to my initial reactions to Dark Souls and the score that I almost gave that game after only playing it for about 15 hours, and how I thought about it then and how I think about it now, and all these things. But I thought it'd be an interesting piece to do, so I'll probably do that next week, because it's the reviews are going to be coming up soon, so obviously I have to do it before the reviews, otherwise it's kind of pointless. And yeah, I've got some other things I'm toying with. I've got some mad... I want to kind of do a video about the Golden Saucer in Final Fantasy VII, just because I've got a weird love-hate obsessive relationship with it, and I think about it a lot, and I don't know why. But anyway, that's sort of like a real fledgling idea. I don't know where I'm going with that, and it may be that it's this weird self-indulgent thing that doesn't go any further than that, and it becomes something that is created based purely on, I don't know what this is, but here it is. But I'd like to try and think about it a bit more and see if I can give it some substance. Anyway, on another note, I probably will start doing a kind of XCOM enemy within sort of series as well, because I don't want people to think that I'm getting really pretentious with this stuff. I mean, obviously there's a lot of YouTube-y style things I want to avoid, and I'm not a big fan of getting really committed to loads of series-based stuff because I think it's quite restrictive. However, I do really enjoy doing those kind of XCOM squad things, and I know a lot of people really like them, and I should have got further with the one I was doing video game, and I didn't. But it's great fun. I love doing it, and it'd be good to bring Kit Kat Chunky back as a bit of regular content. And loads of people seem to be asking for that. So you know what? Yeah, I'm going to sort that out. I'm going to get that rolling. Anyway, I'm going to jump into the questions here. I'm going to do my best to answer as many of these as possible, but obviously, like, there's tons of questions here. And yeah, I will go for as long as I can before I get to the point where I think, oh, I'm getting knackered. I'm just going to reel through them. A quick note, if you are watching or listening, because hopefully, as I say, by next week, I should put these up as audio files, which should be nice. I'm not going to, if I've already answered a question, I won't answer it again. So, I mean, that should be obvious, but I've got so many of these questions that I kind of think if I keep repeating myself, it's going to get boring for everyone. So, first things first from Paul Cosgrove. He asks, Are you still aiming to get yourself to trade shows and the like, E3, etc.? This is a really tricky one. He talks a bit about the funding would be difficult for a company to expense. That's not really the issue here. The issue I have is I don't really like these shows. I obviously had a lot of fun at E3 last year with Video Gamer, doing the awards and doing the lunging and all this stuff. But I kind of felt like I'd been thinking about E3 for a long time. I've been thinking about it since January. And I kind of been noting down every time I had a funny idea of stuff to do at E3. And I was really proud of what I did at E3 within that week. But I'd done all the jokes, you know. I mean, I couldn't think of any other jokes to do. And I kind of feel like I could go again and do the same jokes, but, you know, funny awards but it would feel like really rehashed. And if I think of something good to do at E3 again, I would go. But as it was, I kind of felt like I comprehensively took the piss out of the entire thing quite effectively when I was there. And I don't think I've got any other way to do that again without just repeating it. I think you do run the risk then of becoming like, you know, in the way that Ali G sort of stopped working when people knew who he was, you know. It was beautiful when it started out, and the fact that he was talking to politicians who thought he was legit. But as soon as people knew who his characters were, it kind of ruins the joke. So if people turn up and they go, oh, it's this fucking funny-haired twat come to joke with us, then it wouldn't really work. And also, I just don't really like E3. I think last year especially, it was just a big advert. You're like walking in an advert. In the past, these shows are really good because you can get a lot of hands-on experience, and then you can talk to the developers, and then you can basically go and report back to people and tell them what the game's like and what the game's about. But now the process has changed quite a lot. A lot of these things now are about trailers. And yeah, so, you know, you sit on the internet, you watch a trailer of a new game, you watch some gameplay footage of a new game, and you can hear a developer doing an interview about the game. Now, really, you know, generally speaking, developers don't really talk about interesting stuff. Most developers are picked as spokespeople on the basis of them being able to repeat key messages and not deviate and not go off on strange tangents and cause trouble. So interviews are boring. The gameplay stuff is usually not just shown to media. Obviously, The Witcher 3 at Gamescom was awesome because they were showing it as a kind of behind closed doors thing, but even that leaked eventually. Generally speaking now, publishers do so much of their communication directly to fans that it kind of renders being there as media a bit irrelevant. And also because E3 now is kind of not a media event, they have all these passes that can get you in, and basically anyone can get in now. They've kind of made it it's not really a trade show. And they pretend it is, and I'm not being snooty about that. I'm not being like, oh, they shouldn't let all those normal people in. But when you do, it just means it becomes a weird promotional event. Like, you know, there's people walking around with capes and cardboard hats that promote games. It's kind of just bullshit. So I could get out there, and I've had companies, in fact, say to me this year, Matt, we want to pay you to come out to E3 for us. And it's like, I don't want to go. LA is kind of a shitty place. E3 is kind of a shitty show. Gamescom is kind of getting the same way. I mean, it's a consumer show. I don't know. I don't like being at those things. However, you know, there is a possibility that I will be doing more of the community-based things. I've had a lot of people ask me if I'm going to go to Rezzed. I might try and pop down if I can, if I've got time. And also like stuff like, you know, Eurogamer Expo, like I have mixed feelings about, but it's cool to be able to just go to London and meet people. And obviously I was there last year with Shut Up and Sit Down, and I'm sure I'll be there this year in some capacity, you know, even if it's just in a pub nearby. So I'm more interested in going to games events where there are community meetups and there are kind of things where I can meet people and then chat to people and stuff like that. But actually going and reporting on those things, it's just a hell of a lot of trouble. Anyway, that was a long answer. Chris Anderson asks, what drew you into comedy and when did you first find this out? And what made you want to combine your love of comedy with your love of gaming? That's quite an easy one, really. I don't know. I'd always wanted to do comedy videos. And when I was at university, I was always trying to convince my friends to make comedy videos with me. And I never could. So I made the wrong decision then. And I just didn't do it because I couldn't get anyone else to do it with me. And obviously what I should have done is do it myself. And actually it wasn't really till I was at Video Gamer when I kind of thought, well, I want to make this stuff and I haven't really got anyone who I can make it with, so I'm just going to do it myself. And then I realized that actually I should have done that years ago. I just had to stop that for a second because I dropped water all over myself. It doesn't look like I've pissed myself, but it's pretty bad. But yeah, anyway, I started making stuff on my own, and then I also started making stuff. I made some funny videos with my mate Steve called Matt and Steve's Amazing Week. And one of the videos we made was about Gran Turismo 5 and about making cups of tea. And that was, within the industry, that was really popular. And that was basically almost a video that got me my first job in games media because it kind of temporarily made me a bit of a face within the games industry. And people were like, oh, you were the guy who did that stupid video about cups of tea. But I guess the first comedy video I did that was quite successful was when I made a video about BAM, which was butter and jam, which I made on a weekend when I was doing my first job in London. And it was kind of funny in the fact that loads of student unions got in touch with me saying, can we play this at a student film festival? And it was like kind of embarrassing because it was like, I'm not a student and I haven't been a student for about 3 years. So yeah, I've always liked doing funny stuff. And I used to be bad at it, but I've got better at it over time. And now to be honest, the combining comedy with gaming was just something I did because it was two things that I loved. And the fact that I get to do that now more regularly is just awesome. That's kind of the long and short of it, really. Tom Bickmore asks, wouldn't I rather wait for the PC release of Dark Souls 2? Yes, but no. I think what I'll probably do is I'll probably play through it on console just so I can play it and have an opinion on it. And then hopefully the PC release will come soon enough that I can then do the sort of streaming Pants Man thing on the PC version. For various reasons, it'll be easier, etc. Blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, I mean, they haven't announced when it's coming out. I'm concerned about that. I don't know. I'm concerned about that for a variety of reasons. It's just very vague. Anyway, Andrew Selkirk has loads of questions about Twixes. He says, 1 Twix a day is no man to live. I've given up my Twixes for now. I say given up, I ran out. So, what's the appropriate plural for Twix? Twixai. He's got loads of questions here. I'm just going to ask one more, to be honest. You can't ask this. This is a new rule. You can only ask one question each time. Because otherwise, we'll never, ever, ever do it. But yeah, how sustainable do you think this new approach will be? Talking about the Patreon thing. I guess I kind of covered that last week with the Q&A thing. But I guess it's worth repeating. And also, is there any fears in regards to the expectations of backers? Absolutely. I'm terrified. And I'm not terrified now, but I'm terrified because I know that there will come a point where the expectations that people have of what they want from what I'm doing will not be the same as what I'm doing. And that may be that what I'm doing slightly changes, or it may well be that the expectation changes. And I can't really avoid that. And all I can do is just try and keep the dialogue going and keep things like this to make sure that any changes that occur are measured and tracked and seen in advance. And this is why actually kind of doing stuff like this is really important, I think. Yeah, that's the long and short of it. I mean, I think it's just unavoidable. I mean, at the moment, I'm really happy with the way it's going, and I'm really excited to start doing things and start producing things that you guys like. And I don't know what those things are going to be necessarily, because sometimes stuff's just going to come up and it'll happen, and hopefully you'll love it. But I'm also aware that if it does take off, if it gets to a point where I'm actually like, at the moment I'm close to earning enough money to like just sustainably live on without much else, really, which is awesome. I wasn't expecting this at all. I was expecting this to be a kind of extra part-time income, allowing me to do a part-time job on this. But actually it's like, well, if it continues to do well, it could just be my job, which would be amazing. But then again, there may come a point where if the number keeps rising, then it might get to a point where people look at the amount of money I'm earning and they go, God, you're earning loads of money. And at that point, there may be a kind of switch that clicks in people's head that goes, well, if you're earning loads of money, you need to make more videos. You need to do this, and, I can understand that. I don't think it's also always an implicit decision to change the way you think about things like that. But I think it does happen. There's always that sense of value and sense of what should somebody get in return for that. I mean, I do all the time. It's the way we all look at the world. So I don't know how I'm going to deal with that, really. I mean, if that does happen, obviously that's very much an if, but that may get difficult because obviously there's only so much time I can spend doing things. And part of the reason I wanted to do this was not to get into the trap of being a YouTuber and releasing a new video every day just to keep a kind of insane fan base happy. So I think all I can say on that is we're just going to have to see how it goes. I think this is completely new. It's completely different. All I can say is that I haven't jumped into this without serious thought about what might happen and what could happen, and all I can do is really just try and react and prepare best for any eventualities. But of course, a part of that is fear. If you're not afraid, then you should always be a little bit afraid. It's not a bad way to live. Anyway, Bellend Sebastian says, can you hook me up with pictures of Charlie Brooke on the shitter? Sadly not, Bellend. Des wondered about any kind of possible video games podcast. Yes, as I said, that will happen. All I have now is the name of the podcast, which I'll share with you now. The name of the podcast, and I hope you guys like it. If you don't like it, then maybe I'll rework it. But I've been thinking about this for a while, is Daft Souls. Just because Daft Souls. A bunch of people who are daft, talking about games. Oh, it's a pun. But yeah, I've kind of got what I want the video game podcast to be lined up in my head. To be honest, it's not going to be anything revolutionary. It's just going to be some really cool people who I know talking about video games once a week. Job done. But yeah, I kind of want to make sure I've got something set up so I can make sure I do it every week. Because that's quite a hard commitment to do. It involves commitments from other people. And I've got lots of things I need to work out about that, basically. Because, I mean, especially if originally it was going to be a hobby, but now it's going to be an actual thing as part of this. It's like, well, I'm earning money from doing this. So how do I deal with that in terms of the people who are invited on my podcast? I don't want to do the whole thing of being like, oh, you're being paid with exposure, because that's bullshit. But also, podcast isn't really much work. You just sit and have a drink and talk about games. So I need to try and work out a way of doing that, basically. Maybe if it's just a case of like bunging everyone a $5 each week or $10 or something. I don't know. I need to basically, this is yet another thing I need to work out about budgeting. Hooray! We'll see. And actually on that note, a lot of people said, are you going to do stuff with Shut Up and Sit Down, or the people from Video Gamer, or the people from Regular Features as part of your videos? Sort of, yes. Video Gamer, maybe not, because they're a company and it's more difficult because of that, basically, when you're working directly with companies. However, like, when I get a podcast rolling, I'd love to have like people like Simon and Brat appearing on the podcast because I love those guys. In terms of other video stuff, yes. I mean, obviously, I work really closely with Shut Up and Down. You know what I mean? I'd love to get Quinns and some stuff because he's brilliant when it comes to video games. I'd love to do more stuff with the Regular Features guys. It's just a case of matter of finding the time because obviously they're all working jobs when I'm here. But in the future, yes. And also just other people, like some people in my life who I'd really like to do some stuff with. My housemate Laurie is absolutely fucking insane, but he's brilliant. He's so funny. And I'd love to do some stuff with him, even if it is just some videos of him and me sitting and playing a game and talking. Because, I mean, that's sort of a tried and tested YouTube-y Let's Play style thing, but I just think he's just so brilliant as a human being that I'd love to involve him somehow and just to show you guys what he's like, because he's amazing. I know people say that about their friends all the time, but this guy, he's great. He's great. There's tons of Twix questions. It's such a ridiculous complaint to have. So many Twix questions. Somebody asking if I've bitten the ends off a Twix and used it as a straw, but no, I haven't done that. James asks elves or fairies. Elves. George Conway asks, do you prefer fluffy or non-fluffy hair? Not really fussed. I've got fluffy hair, but my girlfriend doesn't have fluffy hair. Haven't really thought about it. Fluffy hair always impresses me more, but just because it's more difficult to tame. It's like, well done. You've done some good work to keep that in control. Datadog asks, will you do another XCOM playthrough? Answer that, yes. Gonna do it. I'm gonna die. Hooray. Cliff Johnson, will you consider inviting people from the industry to discuss gaming matters? To give us developer/corporate views of various matters? Interesting. Probably not, to be honest. I mean, maybe. Maybe. The difficulty with that stuff is, I'm not really a big fan of interview-based stuff because I think people don't often talk about interesting things in an interview format, because often people are looking to promote something rather than talk about things. There are exceptions. Secondly, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously I have worked on the corporate side of the industry because I used to work in PR, so I'm kind of familiar with a lot of that stuff. So really, a lot of things I already know about from either previously working in the industry or having conversations with people who work in different areas of the industry. And I kind of feel like a lot of the time I'll be able to give you a better view of things by having conversations with people off the record and then telling you what people within that area have said about the way things work. I mean, I might do some stuff like that, especially with a podcast. It might be good to do that. But I think the problem is when you're directly talking to people, often you can't really get much interesting information because it gets to a point where they have to say, I can't really talk about that. So, yeah, possibly, but I kind of want to move away from interviews because I think original content is more interesting, largely, because a lot of interviews kind of come out a bit flat. Adam Libonati Roche, which is a great name, says, we'll be taking the inspiration from the PBS shows like Ideas Channel and Game Show. I'm not super familiar with them, but having done a bit of a Google, it looks like they basically deal with kind of looking at topics in more details. And I mean, I'm not necessarily going to I don't think it'd be fair to say I'm taking inspiration from this sort of thing, but I definitely want to do more feature-based stuff. I mean, what that will be will vary, but often if I do have an idea about something I really want to talk about in detail, like a question or an idea or something, then I would like to do more detailed stuff. And actually, going back to the last question about would I want to talk to people and involve people with discussion in these things, possibly yes, but possibly not actually people from within the industry all the time. There's a lot of stuff I think about sometimes, and I mean, I'm from a psychology background and I studied that at university, and I find the older I get, I kind of find myself increasingly interested in that again in a weird way, and not to a point that I want to go and study it, but I kind of think about things and I go, I wonder if this has an effect in this way, and I kind of wish I had access to top dog psychology people to ask them, like, have there been any studies in terms of the relationship between this and this and this? So, I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to do that immediately because that stuff is like, well, I don't know, that would be a whole job in itself, frankly. But I don't know. I mean, if there's a topic that I become really fascinated by, then the idea of me stopping and producing kind of a bigger, more in-depth piece, possibly with external experts and stuff, to kind of hold it together and doing almost like, I mean, what I've always tried to do with the stuff when I was doing big features at Video Gamer was to kind of basically create the equivalent of a big 3,000, 4,000 word essay or whatever about a game, but to create it in a video form. That's much more, I think, I think video demands a lot more tightness in terms of editing. You know, a lot of the thing with writing is I always describe writing as, it's like readers are falling down a page and all you can try and do is grab them. Every new paragraph is a chance for you to grab them, like to get an ice hook in the wall, like, and just hopefully grab their attention. But a lot of the time people will just skim, and you'll write a sentence that will grab their attention, then they'll read from there. They won't go back and read it all again. And I mean, some people do, but that's just generally speaking the audience, the way you're dealing with an audience. Whereas I think with video, it's much harder because people are going to scrub through and they're not even going to see the stuff. Like, you know, they're going to jump ahead. And it means that if you lose someone's attention, then they might miss the next ice hook, the next bit that makes them wake up and go, huh. So I think pacing and structure and completely cutting away all the dead weight is so much more important in video than it is in print. So that's something I try and do, basically. I try and just do the same kind of intelligent content that you get on, long form websites like Eurogamer or RPS, you know, these big kind of more Eurogamer for the lengthy stuff. I don't always like it, but I think, yeah, I'm going to continue to try and do that sort of stuff, but obviously in between doing kind of little bits of nonsense. I'm talking with the idea of having a slight thing on the thumbnails, maybe some slight coloration, so that if you do know the channel, you'll be able to know by something subtle on the video thumbnail whether or not it's serious or a joke. I kind of like the idea of doing that, and most of the time still being like not sure, but then if you really know, if you kind of look, you'll notice a pattern, and so you can kind of know that it's going to be a joke in advance. But I don't know how people feel about that. It's sort of a weird one, because sometimes I feel like I'm pissing people off by tricking them, but at the same time, sometimes I kind of like that. There's something about subterfuge that I really enjoy. Yeah, I kind of like tricking people, especially because it's what it boils down to is I enjoy using like styles to kind of recreate things. Like obviously with the Dark Souls thing yesterday, I had so much fun making myself sound like a Dark Souls character, which was a combination of acting and clever audio techniques in terms of changing the pitch of my voice. And yeah, I like doing that stuff. I like being like, how can I make something look or sound exactly like this? And if you look at my work, I've done that quite a few times, especially in terms of the spoof things like the shopping channel and the announcement I was going to be a voice actor for XCOM. So yeah. Okay, on. Okay, James Connell asks a bunch of stuff, and he says, I'd love for you to do your long, rambling videos, especially based on older games. I've already kind of talked about that. That's definitely something I'm going to do. Planescape Torment and Beaver Pinata on my list. He says, I'd love to know what you think about games like KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic. Yeah, why not? I mean, that's the thing, why not? I don't have to wait for like the 20-year anniversary of it to do a big piece. I can just do a big piece whenever. So that's kind of exciting. And also kind of frightening. But also, I'm kind of worried if I spend too much time doing that, I'll just completely lose touch with modern games. And yeah, I'll come back to that in a bit. James Connell also asks, Peter Serenoff, which in your flat playing Dark Souls 2 is the way we can make this happen. I very much doubt it. He's a nice guy, but I've not even really met him. I've talked to him on Twitter a bit. He seems like a good guy, but no, I don't think so, sadly. Casper Thogerson, it's one of those amazing Swedish O's with a cross through it. I don't know how to pronounce that, but they look badass. They look like O's that have been in a fight. He says, how did your hair got so awesome? I assume you mean get. For years it was terrible. Yeah. Long story short, my hair was fucking awful for years. And then I realised that if I conditioned it loads and didn't shampoo it, it would look quite cool. And then I realised if I cut it in a weird shape like this, it would look quite nice. So I used to hate my hair. My hair was the worst thing about me for years and years and years. Basically, if you've got big, bushy, curly hair that always looks like a kind of white fro, then don't shampoo it every day. Condition it, wash it once a week with shampoo, and suddenly you'll go from looking like a fucking freak bag to looking like a sexy man. Pro tip. Oh, big one from Harris Khan. As someone who worked in market research, can you tell me a bit about the qualitative and quantitative metrics you used? Oh, I like it when people bring up words like qualitative and quantitative. They take me back. When I worked in market research, I was a qualitative worker, which meant basically what I was doing was I would listen to what the groups of people would say about the games and try and work out what that meant. So often we were dealing with kids, and kids don't have a good understanding of how to explain gameplay mechanics. And so they'd say odd things, and you'd be like, what do they mean? Like they'd say, what don't you like? And they'd say, I don't like this. And you'd be like, what does that mean? And then you'd have to play the game, and you'd look at the game, and you'd understand what they didn't like or what they were referring to, and then you'd understand why they didn't like it. So I really enjoyed it because it was like a puzzle every time I did it. It was like trying to work out what they meant and then working out why the game wasn't working for them. And then I'd write a report which would basically suggest changes they could make to the game that would make it better. And I enjoyed doing that, actually. I enjoyed doing that a lot because it was effectively like reviewing games before they came out and being able to have an impact on things and make games better in some regards. Sometimes not. I remember having to write a big piece for Bayonetta, which I saw like 5 years before it came out, and it was great, and I loved it, and it was just such a cool looking game. But I remember having to write a piece about it, which was basically like the report. I had to report on what people had said, and generally speaking, the average Joe had sort of said that they didn't like the character designs and stuff, and she looked a bit like a French prostitute and all these things, and so that was difficult. That was like, I have to report on this even though it's an opinion that I really disagree with. So that, there are aspects of it that were difficult, but largely it was a really interesting job, and it was sort of a kind of natural progression in a way for me then eventually to end up into games reviewing, because that's sort of what I was doing back then. Hopefully I'm allowed to talk about all that stuff now because it's been such a long time that nobody will care. But if not, apologies, Sega. I don't mean any harm or trouble. Please don't sue my ass. There are so many questions here. I'll have to jump through some of them because some of them are repeating. Apologies if I have skipped yours and you think that it was not a repeat. But already I've realised I'm not going to be able to answer all of these every week because, Christ, this is way more popular than I was expecting it to be. Andrew Charles asks, am I going to get an Oculus Rift when it comes out? Absolutely. I don't know what I'm looking forward to on it, which is the second part of your question. I think the technology is really cool, and I think it's going to create a new type of game, where it's more about the sense of being in a place. And the only thing I've tried is something of the Giants. It's basically a space sim where like you're looking at planets, and that's it. You're just looking at planets. But I was just blown away by it because it's like I was sat next to the sun, staring at the sun, just going, "Oh my god, it's massive!" And it just created a really powerful sense of actually being in a place. Yeah. So that was kind of a major thing. I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong here, but Jari Leppänen, sorry. How big a part did Shut Up and Sit Down's success in procuring their funding in quite a similar fashion play in your decision to go forward with Patreon? It was part of it, admittedly. I think that I was, obviously when I first met Quinton, he had this plan to crowdfund the site, and I was obviously skeptical about it for obvious reasons. I think most people were. And I don't know, it's an odd one. It's this thing of like, it wasn't really the idea of being able to make the money, it was more the ideal behind it that really appealed to me. And it was a combination of the stuff that was happening with Shut Up and Sit Down and how effective that had been, and also something that a newly games developer, Tom, I always forget his bloody name. Tom, he's the guy who made Gunpoint. I know him. Tom Francis. He's a great guy. But he wrote about how you don't need to have, you just need like 10,000 fans. You don't need like millions and millions of things. You just need 10,000 fans. And that really stuck with me as well. This idea of there being a different way to approach the whole situation with that was to do with games specifically and games publishing. But I kind of felt like there was something to that in games media as well. Because I always found it really depressing when it would be like, people would talk about circulations of magazines and be like, oh, this has only got 10,000 readers, you know? Oh, you know, and in magazine world, that's pretty disastrous unless you have an incredibly cheap overhead running the magazine. But I don't know, it kind of just felt like, it had lost its way. Like the numbers that used to mean something are now being deemed to be irrelevant by the world. And I don't know, it felt really wrong. And most games websites are based on this sort of like getting 2, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million uniques a month. And why? You know, I don't know. So I think it was not so much the conversation about realizing how much money Shut Up and Sit Down was going to be able to make to sustain a whole website. And it is a whole website. So, you know, that money goes to a lot of places. It was more the idea that it's like we can have a website that doesn't really get much traffic and we can make it sustainable. And we can make it sustainable because we make stuff that people care about. And that's something that most people don't. Most places make things that people will click on reliably, not things that people care about. And so it was that idea. And I think really it was more seeing that wasn't crazy that made me really think, yeah, let's do this. And it wasn't an immediate thing. It was something I talked about and I decided against a few times. But then I was having a conversation with a few people in the pub a couple of weeks ago. And I think I was chatting to a guy I used to work with on OXM, Mike Chanel, and he basically saying, you should do it. And I already had Martin Gaston, who's another friend of mine, bug me about it and say, why don't you do this? And I had lots of worries about it and lots of concerns about it, and so I didn't want to do it. But I reassessed it, and I think reassessing it and not just looking at it as a platform and a way of making money, but a way of changing the system and being able to do something different by doing this. And it was quite a frightening jump to take because lots of people, obviously, I didn't actually tell many people I was doing it, if I'm being honest, because it's the sort of thing that, because it's such a new concept, a lot of people are very, very frightened of it. A lot of people are very negative about it and have 110 reasons why it's a really bad idea for, you know, everything. For the media, it's a really bad idea for people, it's a really bad idea for creators. A lot of people have a lot of very negative things to say about it. And I think that comes down to fear, really, largely. I think it's something new. It's a new way of funding stuff, and it's very easy to be cynical. And there was a part of my brain going, you shouldn't do this. It's not going to work. But yeah, I just decided to go ahead with it anyway, really. It was more to do with the idea of kind of harnessing that positivity, you know? And it was less about going, this is a way to make money, because as I kind of tried to communicate in my original videos, I wasn't short of ways to make money in a way. You know, I could have got work in lots of regards, but I was kind of sick of the way that the system's currently run, of being like having to convince somebody else to give you some money to make something that you know other people are going to love, and then in the process of doing that, having to dilute what you're making to make it. there's just so many middlemen involved with something, and I kind of feel like at the moment the world is just shifting towards a world where everything is free, and it's like, oh no, we don't pay for anything, especially with media or content. I'm not paying for that. And I felt like that was wrong, you know? I feel like that's not necessarily true. And I think that if people really care about things, then asking people to pay a little bit of money for something is not a terrible thing to do. And I think that the people who suggest it is are people who've really bought into this model of that the world is going to be funded by adverts and the world is going to be funded by microtransactions, and I don't believe that. So yeah, that's a long and very long answer. All right, I'm going to jump through a few final questions here because this has already gone. Satya Pratik, asks, "Hi Matt, want to ask your opinion on silent protagonist trope." That's a really interesting question. She basically said, well, he or she, apologies. God, this is embarrassing. Anyway. So, do you believe that a mute Freeman improves immersiveness, or do you think he's just a bland jerk? Well, I don't know. I think in some regards, having a character that doesn't talk is really good for kind of storytelling, and also just allows you to imprint yourself on the character in a way that's smart. But they don't necessarily have to be mute. I think it's just a case of how much of their character they express. And I think that the ideal trick is to have a character where your character doesn't talk and it never seems weird. Like, I think Zelda is the best for that, in the fact that you don't ever think about the fact that Link isn't talking. It just doesn't matter. It's just, and actually sometimes it makes jokes about the fact that he doesn't talk, and it's like, I forgot he doesn't talk. Just because it doesn't seem relevant. The story is always about other characters. Your motivations are very simple. You don't need to talk about them. And so I think that's not bad. However, I mean, the thing I always think about is Mario and Sonic, and the fact that Sonic made the huge mistake of giving him a character and conversations, and they just turned him into a jerk. And they've had to redesign Sonic so many times to try and get that identity again, you know, that simple identity. Whereas Mario, it's so smart that really he just goes, wahoo, yeah, wahoo, it's me, Mario. And that's all he does. And that's smart because it means that, you know, they didn't fall into the trap of making him a rad 90s dude who like goes on skateboards and wears a baseball bat. You know what I mean? They didn't do that, and so they haven't got themselves into a trouble. They've kept him timeless, and part of that has not been keeping him mute, but keeping him simple and without a character. And I think that's where it's a good idea. But it is difficult, especially now with games like, I mean, I remember it's odd. It kind of felt, one of the weirdest examples of this was when they reversed it in Call of Duty, when you played as Soap, this mute soldier. Soap, come here, Soap, and all this, and that was great. But then when in Modern Warfare 2, you had Soap was a character in the world that you would see and interact with, and he'd talk to you. That just felt really weird. It's like the idea that he was supposed to be a guy you played. It's just like, I don't know. So I don't think it's a bad thing, to be honest. I think you've just got to have a good reason for it. And I think in first-person games, it's just not a bad idea, because when you have this kind of voice coming out of the void, just coming out of nowhere and being you, it feels very weird. So I think simplicity is not something to be snaffed at. I'm going to do one more question because I am losing my voice. And I apologise because I did want to try and do as many of these as possible, but I'm not even halfway through, which is just crazy. Just crazy. I'm going to jump ahead and there was one at the end I wanted to... Yeah, I can't fucking find it, and I put you on hold there for like ages. That's ridiculous. All right, finally, I'm going to end on this one because he joined this week and it's a nice question to answer, which is, What do you think? What do you know of the guy who plays you at Video Gamer, Jim Trinker? What can we expect of him? Also, are you worried he'll be so good that we'll all forget about you? Yes, I'm really worried about that because he's amazing. I had no process in replacing myself at Video Gamer. That was just something that was handled. But I'm so glad they hired Jim. I mean, he's known as GameWhack Jim, if you haven't heard of him. He's brilliant. He's so funny. And also, I mean, the stuff he made was in between his normal job, which is the way you do it, by the way. That's a lot of people said, how do I do this sort of thing? How do I do what you do? You just do it. And if you get good at it, eventually you might get paid for it. That's it. There's no magic sauce to it. It's just slogging away and doing the work, even when you're tired, you do on your weekends. If you love it, you do it. And if you love it and you get good at it, then you get paid for it. That's the equation. There's nothing else to it. But he's amazing. And his work, I think, is really funny, really smart, really cool. And he really understands games as well. And I think he's the perfect replacement for me because he makes really funny stuff. And also, when you hear him talk about games and dissecting them and talking about why they work and thinking about them, he's got that kind of introspective quality and that understanding of game mechanics that I think is really strong. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what he does because, in my opinion, lots of people are going, oh, it's so sad you've left. Don't be. I'm fine now. Like, if you're watching this, then you'll already be aware that I am fine. It's awesome that by creating this sort of weird job in the industry, by doing all the odd stuff I did last year, I'm just thrilled that I've created a new job slot for someone like Jim. And I think I'm really excited to see what he does with it. Because obviously, for me, having that year at Video Gamer of just having the freedom to just make stuff and take things in a direction, I think that I managed to do a lot of really good stuff with it, and I'm really excited to see what he does with it, because I'm sure he'll do some similar stuff, I'm sure he'll do some different stuff, but whatever he does, I'm sure it's going to be great. Actually, there was one final question I want to ask, because somebody was asking about whether or not I'm going to continue to work with games publishers and saying, you know, are you still going to be able to go to events? Are they still going to talk to you? Yeah, I mean, they will talk to me. Obviously, I think because I'm not doing the advertising thing, it means that in a way, my relationship with them, if I want to deal with publishers, will be much more honest, because there's not going to be any pretense that I'm going to like do loads of stuff with them and then in return my ad guys might get into a good relationship with them and be able to get some ads. I must say, like, some people thought there was a direct correlation. There isn't. There are barriers in place to make sure that the ads people and the editorial are separated, but it's not like you're bent. It's just the fact that it's a really, to realize that, to know every day that your kind of paycheck is being paid indirectly by the people whose stuff you're reporting on. It's just uncomfortable. It's not like something that makes you go, oh God, I'm so corrupt. It's a sad realization. Every time you realize it, you kind of just go, oh, really? Yeah. And that's just the way the industry functions. But it's not the way this functions. Fucking rock on. My big thing at the moment, though, is how much I'm going to do that, though. Because at the moment, obviously, I've got loads of ideas of things I want to make. I don't necessarily have time to go and look at preview events of games. And also, like with early previews, how much can you really say? I mean, I think when it gets to the stage where I can do hands-on and I can capture footage and I can illustrate stuff and I can say this game's good because of this, then I might start doing that. But at the moment, I'm not sure how much I want to engage with PRs. I mean, in some regards, it's an easy way of doing things. I mean, I can't afford to buy every game, to be honest. So, you know, if I do have something I want to look at, getting review code from a publisher, that's something I'm probably going to do. But I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like the difficulty of these things is you end up getting into a cycle where if you keep going to events because you're invited by publishers, then you end up just trapped in the same cycle that everyone's already in. And it's not a thing about good or evil or people who are bad at their jobs or good at their jobs. It's very easy, if you don't have an idea of what you want to do as a games journalist, to let that be dictated for you by other things. So if you haven't got any good ideas, what am I going to make this week? Well, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to go to this event on Tuesday and then I can make a video about that. And before you know it, you're just trapped into the same cycle as everyone else, producing content that goes out on embargo day, etc., etc., etc. So I probably will work with publishers and I probably will go to events, but I guess it's more a case of whether or not they want to work with me. And we'll have to see, basically, because I mean, I am going to be a bit of a dick about it. If I don't want to go to something, I'm not going to do it, you know? I actually had a publisher that I really don't want to work with again because I think they're fucking assholes and they're just idiots. But yeah, I was like, I want to come and see this game at Gamescom, and they were kind of like really trying to pressure me into also like doing a hands-on and doing an interview about a racing game. And I kept trying to jokingly point out that it's like, I don't know anything about cars. I can't drive. Like, this is a specialist racing game. I cannot do it. And yet every email they kept saying, oh yeah, we'll put you in for an interview for this as well. And it's like, no. Like, A, I don't do interviews. B, I don't know anything about cars. And so when you're dealing with PRs like that, where they're just really hell-bent on getting what they want out of it, and they're not really going to listen to you, because I'm a reasonable man, and I think if somebody's aware that I'm going to come along and look at something on the basis of I'll do this, that's fine. But there's a lot of bullshit within these things, and the amount of times I've turned up at events and you've been told that you can capture gameplay and then you get there and you can't. I mean, I'm not saying that all PRs do this stuff, but a lot of PRs, their main aim is to make sure people turn up at an event and then to make sure that people make some content about things. That's their job. That's what they've got to do, PR. They promote content. That's what they do. But I kind of find it as a one-man team, if I'm not careful, then dealing with PRs and dealing with PR events is going to take up such a huge chunk of my time that although you would get good opinions on upcoming stuff, that would kind of be all you get. So I think at the moment I'm going to have to pick and choose the stuff that I really want to cover. But the problem of doing that, of course, then is you are going to have some PRs who go, well, fuck you, because, dealing with PR is it's a two-way street. You have to negotiate and you have to find a middle ground with people because you have different aims. And that's just the nature of it. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just the way it is. And as a one-man team, I'm not sure what my capacity to deal with that is. Anyway, this has been massive. This has been a huge video. I think at the moment my internet's so shit that it might be a huge struggle trying to upload this video. So if you are watching it in a lower resolution because of that, I apologise. Anyway, as I say, this weekend I'm going to try and sort it out, so this will be an audio podcast as well. Yup-de-doo. And sorry I couldn't answer all the questions. I think I'm going to have to do it on a first come, first served basis in the future, just because there's so many questions. I would just be here all day, and I think it would get to the point where I was just answering questions instead of making videos, which would probably get boring after a while. But anyway, as I say, if you missed it this time and you didn't get your question answered, then actually I might continue with this list of questions next week rather than putting a new one up. That might make more sense. Yes, that will make more sense. I'll do that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!